Hello and welcome to the 38th edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paul Logidici, as your host. In today's episode, I will discuss how to get up after you fall down with Dév Ojha. Thank you for coming on the show.
Uh, Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
It's Dév Ojha, by the way.
Ojha.
Yeah,
I'm
all
sorry.
good,
I'm sorry.
all
I'm
good.
sorry. Apologize. Dude, some of the names I get on this podcast are really hard.
Yeah,
and-
mainly when it's an Indian name, right?
Well, no, even my name, it's like Logidici at the
Yeah.
end, and I've heard that my whole life, man. Like, believe me,
Yeah.
I know what it's like. So my apologies for that.
All good.
So if you want to begin by just telling us a little about like what you're doing here in Prague and like kind of like where you see yourself going, maybe like educationally, like what you've done, and just let the audience know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so basically how I got to Prague, it's kind of a long story full of turns and twists.
Mine
Basically-
too.
Yeah, but basically I grew up in a small town in the Czech Republic called Orlova. It's, according to some statistics, the worst place to live in the Czech Republic, which is kind of interesting. But and then I went to school in Ostrava, which is the third biggest city in the Czech Republic. And I've always kind of had this dream of living in America and kind of ending up working there and starting a business there and being successful over there. So after high school, I decided to move to New Jersey or New York and attend Rutgers University. So for a half of the time I was there, I lived in Manhattan, and then a half of the time I was there, I lived in New Jersey on campus of the university. And after that, I had some medical issues, and I ended up in Prague, and now I study at UNIP with you. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my life path.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself going after UNIP? You think? Do you think you're gonna go to the U.S. and start a business, or maybe do something here?
Over the time I was in the US, I kind of like it's after I left the US, I realized that maybe it's not the right place for me to be in the long term because the US is like very competitive and people work long hours there, and like the culture there is very dynamic. So maybe for like I might live there for maybe like a year or two, or maybe I'll visit there while I'm still young. But in the long term, I probably don't want to live there because I feel like in Europe we have a better kind of structure to maintain a family, to kind of live here in the long term. We have a better social security system for the vulnerable people. So in case something happens, like a life event or anything else, there's like better support over here than in the U.S. I think, and yeah, but. You
No,
never,
I can see your point. I
You
can
never
see it.
you never know where you'll end up. So we'll see where I end up.
Yeah, and life's all about these moves that people make. I know I didn't see myself ever being in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Like really, if you told me when I walked the stage in high school after I got my diploma, like you'll be finishing your degree in Prague, or you'll be working on it in Prague, which is more of my story now.
Yeah, but sometimes you can't predict these things.
No, of course not. Really, and this has been such a tremendous opportunity for myself as well. And it's kind of cool that, you and I both went to like the opposite sides at some point. You know, and
You came from the US to the Czech Republic. I came from the Czech Republic to the US. And at the end of the day, I feel like you want to come back to the US, and I want to stay in the Czech Republic. So,
Yeah, and
it
it's-
all comes full circle.
yeah, and it's kind of like part of me wanting to stay there is because my family's there, and we're very like close, and I would love the life of being a lot of these diplomats, they travel around the world, and like I thought about that as a career path, and it's still possible that I do that, but I don't know, I just want to make sure I'm there for my family, and like it's kind of like an important piece. Even my West Coast friends say this, or like my Western United States friends say this as well, but they move around a lot in the West.
Yeah.
Like they move constantly. Whereas I think every member of my family has not really left New England. Like we get people in Vermont, some people in New Hampshire and Connecticut.
Yeah, I see that.
one's in
Like when
Rhode
I
Island.
studied in the US, and like you're talking about like moving within the US, and what I've noticed is that in other countries, when you talk about like moving, like people move to like different countries, but like in the U.S. you're just, because the country is so big, they just like move within the country. Like moving for an American means something different than
Yeah.
moving for like a European
Hmm.
or like someone from Asia or like from a different part of the world. So that's also an interesting like distinction.
A lot of people who are in the West, they come from the East. Obviously, I mean, eventually you trace it back, unless they, they came from Asia and they moved in on that side, or even Australia, I suppose. But
Yeah.
most people they come from the eastern side. If you look at history and their culture is really all about like, it's very American dynamic, kind of like what you were talking about, like
Yeah.
very like
It's
everything's moving all the time. Where I'm from, it's very like static. Like
yeah.
people don't really leave.
And they're kind of like, and I feel like that is a good thing on one part, but it
Hmm.
also like ends up creating a lot of issues because
Yeah.
they, like what I notice in these parts of the world where like people don't really move and like stick to one place, they kind of tend to live in a bubble.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I had a
like
coworker who didn't leave Peabody, where I'm from,
yeah,
for 10 years.
yeah, and then
10 years.
you kind of when you're in the same community for your whole life, when you haven't explored these different kind of places in the world, different cultures, different people, you kind of like get stuck in the same mindset,
Yeah.
which ends up like for some people kind of don't mind that, but for me personally, that's why I want to that's why I'm not so sure where I'll end up, because there's so much to explore and so much to see in the world that like the world, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah. Really.
But
And
at the end of the day, I feel like it comes down to like where your heart is.
hmm
And for you, as you said, it's like your family in the U.S. and you kind of want to be there for them.
yeah, of
And
course.
for me, it's also my family. But the thing is, with my family, it's just my mom and dad are staying in my hometown, of course. But like my little brother is in the Netherlands, and then my older brother might be moving to Germany soon.
Okay.
So we're kind of going to be all over the world, and these like I realized that with today's technology and everything,
hmm
you can stay in touch with those people. Number one, and also like whenever you want to meet, like if you work hard enough, you can just like travel for vacations and like have vacations together. And,
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And getting into the topic a little bit is like part of getting back up sometimes is like exploring a new avenue.
yeah,
Whether it be traveling or even for those people that they're staying in the same area. If you're listening to this, it's like exploring a new way forward.
yeah.
Usually that's what helped me.
And
Like
it's kind of like when you fall down, when like life brings you down, whatever, you have health issues, you have like you're struggling with something, you can't find a job
mhm.
or whatever. It's kind of like what I see with a lot of people from our generation.
Mhm.
They kind of just like break down and like don't necessarily like do anything about it, and kind of just like complain.
Yeah.
They just like kind of like say like, oh, this sucks, like this is bad, and like why is it happening to me?
Yeah.
But instead of that mindset, like what I've learned, like I've also had that mindset to an extent when I was younger, like blaming other things, like the government is like forcing me to do this, whatever. Like the school is like I hate the school because they're forcing me to study, blah 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 blah. But then I realized that like at a certain age, you can literally do anything. You can
Mhm.
like with enough like hard work, dedication, and if you kind of like have a drive, you can kind of do whatever you want, and nothing like whatever is that thing that brought you down, you can change it.
Yeah.
So like I don't know, like for me personally, what brought me down the most were my health issues in the U.S. It was kind of when I was experimenting with a lot of like drugs, alcohol, blah blah blah, and I ended up actually in the hospital. I had to go to the Czech Republic and get treatment, and I was on the hospital bed for like a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
I think like a month and a half. So that kind of was the biggest thing that brought me down. And since I like wanted to live in the US for so long, like my whole life was kind of like building up to that. And I finally like I like the American dream was like within reach, I was like in the middle of college in the US at Rutgers, I got good grades. I had job opportunities lined up
Yeah.
and everything. And like it was like my dream was like right there within reach. And then within like the blink of an eye,
It was just
it was just like gone.
yeah.
So like like what do you do after that, you know? And I was kind of dealing with that. Like it was like mentally, you know, like
It's a challenge,
it
man.
ruined me. Like genuinely ruined me to an extent because I was like, you know, these like 20 years I've been kind of working up the ladder, kind of going to, you know, doing the SAT test, blah blah blah. I was in the top 3% for the like SAT exam to get to Rutgers.
Yeah,
And I've like worked hard for that. And then I kind of like by my own mistake, I've taken that away from myself.
yeah,
And you know, like whether we realize it or not, it's like there's always, you know, the next step. Like
yeah,
you're never kind of
yep.
stuck in where you are. And if you kind of just like look around and find things to do and keep your mind busy, like it's better than kind of like just like complaining.
Yeah, I would agree. And you know, everyone has a story. You know, like that one's pretty hardcore. Though. Like that is pretty strong. I know that when I flew here to Europe on my exchange, I did all the paperwork on my own. You know, my family helped a little bit, but it was largely up to me. And then I came here, and then about a week in, I got a really bad phone call, and I had to fly home for a funeral in early February, mid-February. I flew back, and then within a month, COVID set in. 3 weeks, a month, and then I flew home again.
Yeah.
So my semester abroad was really like a short 3 weeks, and then a funeral, and then another 3 weeks, and then COVID, and then I flew home. So I think I circumnavigated the world in 2 months on the planes because I remember I did the math back and so I flew there, flew home, flew there again, and then flew home again.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same route, but
And it was
like,
kind of like the same a similar situation that you're kind of expecting something. Like it's right there, right in front of you.
yeah.
And then it just like something happens and like it all like disappears.
Yeah, and part of it was so painful. I mean, I was an exchange student at the time. I'm one of the few UNIP students that was exchange and then like full-time student, you know? Like I remember both. With the exchange, I just remember like everyone was having the time of their life and I'm kind of like I'm super depressed right now. You know?
Yeah.
Like I'm really like I don't know how to be happy right now. Like I'm getting some really awful news. And then when COVID hit, man, I flew home and I was just kind of like, what am I going to do with my life now? Like I, you know, I'm not in college anymore. I'm like doing everything online. By that September, I dropped out of my old school and I was working at a liquor store, which was actually pretty formative. Anyone who knows me, I have great stories from working there.
Yeah, I know some of them personally.
But it was a very formative time, you know, like it was a very, you know, important time in my life. And I just remember I'm with my buddy and he's like, do you ever think about going back? And I was like, maybe if they take my credits. And then in this long process later, like I'm back and I got to do 2 more years out here. And for a great price too. And I really, you know, I really feel very humble that I got to come back here and do so many things.
Yep.
And you know, we were on student council together, him and I, and that was also something I'm really like humble and proud to be able to have had an opportunity to do.
Yeah, I feel like we did a lot of good work,
Yeah.
even through all our struggles that we went with.
Yeah, and it's like even now I'm going through things, you know, at this very moment. I mean, some of my work is not what it could be, and I could have focused harder on a class, and I didn't. And I'm paying for it now, you know. So it's kind of like you got to remember, and you know, not to get political. You know, I'm not going to get political at all, but I am going to say that there was when Trump won, Obama gave a speech in front of Congress, and the only thing I'm going to say again is he was like the sun will rise again, and when it does, you know, it's a new day.
Yeah.
And so he was painting it in a very morbid picture. You know, he's a Democrat, Trump's a Republican, you know, the viciousness between them, of course. But just that statement, I think is a very powerful one. And it was kind of, it's a more powerful version of what you were saying earlier, where it's like, it can't be the end, you know?
Yeah.
You can't let it be the end. People grow and they move on.
And you, like, some people kind of are able to get back up, like, right away, you know? Like, something bad happens, and they kind of just like acknowledge it, but they're just like keep going, screw it. And then some people like take really really long to get over the bad things that happen to them or the failures that they have because of their own kind of doing. But like I don't feel like either kind of option is too good, Because if you're with that type of like, often the type of people who just like are able to go like this, like whatever happens to them, like those like you know nobody's like that. Number one,
Yeah.
and like if you were like that, like you would be a robot. Because like if nothing like negatively affects you, then like what's like do you even have emotions?
Yeah,
Like
like what's the
like
point?
you're not human. Like only robots can function like that. So I feel like if the viewers, if like you don't have to kind of do everything right away and get over everything right away, but just like acknowledge it, learn from the mistakes and take some time to reflect. Like I feel like
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
When you fall down, just like reflect on that, and yeah, just like get back up because like the life goes on. No matter what, whatever happens to you, life goes on.
Yeah, and I remember, the events I talked about where I flew here and flew back and flew. That was in 2020. And I remember I did a lot of hiking that summer. That was like big for me. I
Yeah.
remember I was like, okay, well, we're all sitting around doing nothing. It's like COVID time, and I'm like, guys, we got to do something. Like, let's go out and let's hike some stuff. Um, some of my friends were not so fit.
Mm.
Some of them were, and I remember like sometimes I'm near the front of the group. Sometimes I was the dead last person. One of my buddies that I constantly go hiking with, I was the one always in the back, just because like he's got more muscles than me, man. This
Yeah.
kid's flying up the mountain. You're really in competition with yourself at the end of
Yeah,
the day.
exactly.
Take a look in the mirror.
I had this trouble when I was starting my like gym journey.
Yeah.
When I was like until I was 15, I was super skinny, like extremely like very underweight.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of got made fun of for it for my whole life until that moment, and people told me like do some sports, eat more, blah 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 blah, and I was just like, well, like I'm eating more, nothing's happening, and like I tried sports, nothing's happening, and I kind of just like got into this mindset that like nothing's gonna help me, and that like I just like that I'm just gonna get made fun of for my whole life
Yeah.
for like being skinny.
Yeah.
And like a lot of kids and like young people have that kind of like uh, because of bullying, like they get mean things said to them, and you kind of start to internalize it. But when I was 15, I kind of decided that like to do a project for high school. We had this kind of final project for the whole semester,
I see.
where you had to kind of come up with something to do throughout the whole semester
Mm-hmm.
and write a report about it, and it had to be like structured, blah 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 blah. So I chose, like I kind of kicked myself, and just they told us like it's an opportunity to kind of improve something in your life. So I kicked myself and I was like, dude, I'll just go to the gym and write about it and record myself, record my progress, track everything. And that's kind of like over that time, over that like maybe semester, over that semester, I gained like 10 kilos, which is
Mhm.
like 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a
Of
good amount.
of like muscle.
Yeah.
It wasn't fat, but like muscle, because the thing that was kind of keeping me from reaching that goal was that I like whenever I tried it, I wasn't doing it for like long enough for it to become a habit, and I wasn't doing it properly.
Yeah.
But like if you want to, change something in your life that you're unhappy about, you have to make a structured plan on how to achieve it.
Of course.
Like if you're broke, you're not just gonna be like, oh, I'll just, go to the lottery and like gamble because like that's the fastest way to get money.
Yeah, of course.
You have to kind of like weigh all the risks, do research, and then make smart investments. And that doesn't only come with money.
Yeah.
That kind of comes with all aspects of your life.
I don't ever think about gambling just myself, because I know that maybe I might like it, and
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna go for it. Like
Yeah.
really, I don't know. I mean, like we have a casino in Revere now. They just built one. I haven't really been inside. I remember I was gonna go inside, but we didn't end up going in because there was like some trouble, whatever. But I don't know, man. I'm not. I could go in there and party, but I'm not gonna touch any of the gambling stuff because
But I feel like gambling is kind of human nature. Like not
Yeah.
not necessarily with money, but like you always gamble with something.
yeah, of course, of course.
So like casinos are one thing. Like you spend like what 1,000 Czech crowns, $40, $100, whatever, and then like most of the like 99% of the time you don't get anything back. But then people gamble with like more kind of long lasting things.
Yep.
Like with their life, that's what I was doing back in college, and like I still do it to an extent now, where I kind of like seek these kind of like thrills and these adrenaline rushes, and
Yeah.
don't really like kind of gamble with like things that I shouldn't, but I feel like that's like everyone does that.
Yeah, of course. And I don't know, it just makes you. Sometimes people use these wedges or these crutches to like keep themselves properly entertained.
Hmm.
But life is full of all these things where it's like, look at all these other things you can do that
Yeah.
are not so destructive. Like at this liquor store, I'd watch the same group of people come in and they'd buy scratch tickets all day long, and they'd win, but it never seemed like it was replenishing the amount of money that they were spending on the
Yeah.
scratch. Now, if you love this, like if you're like, yeah, you know what, I want to live my life scratching scratch tickets, okay, do it, but it's like I would not recommend that,
Yeah.
and
Because there's no plan in that. There's no like long term benefit.
not
Also,
at
like
all.
a lot of these people don't even know what they'll do with that money.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like they go and like they're like, I'll win the lottery one day, but like what then? Like
Yeah.
what's your goal? You'll have like 100 million, but like what will you do? And a lot of these like lottery winners that end
They
up like
blow it all.
yeah,
They
they
blow it
like
all.
right away they just blow it, and not even on like positive things, but just like alcohol, drugs, like, and then they end up like a lot of them like a lot of the people who win large sums of money end up being worse off after that than
Yeah.
before they wanted, which is kind of a paradox.
I know that if I was a lottery winner, I would definitely try and be very smart with this money.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would try and do. Maybe write a few books or something, man. Like I don't know, like you could probably hire somebody to like type while you speak, and then you could like make money off of a biography.
Yeah.
Like that, like you could make money off the money. I'd put a lot of it in the stock market, depending on what I think is like a safe investment.
I never really thought about like honestly if I like won the lottery. Number one, that would be like unplausible because I don't think I don't go to casinos or I don't like buy lottery
I'd buy a
tickets.
house. I'd buy a house.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
anything crazy.
Probably like I'd buy real estate. That's
Yeah.
true.
I'd definitely buy. I know that where I live at home, I'd probably walk up to my parents and be like, "I'm gonna go buy my own house, like just down
Yeah.
the road. Like don't worry about it."
Yeah, I feel
if
like
win
real
the
estate
lottery.
would be a good investment.
Yeah, of course. I know that it's really hard in my area to get into real estate because the property prices are all so high, like
Yeah.
to begin with. Like we have a very high minimum wage, but that's coupled with a very high like property rate. So it makes it very hard for even people coming in who are immigrants to like kind of get themselves established because it's a challenge, man. I mean, like the properties there are very expensive.
Yeah,
And
like
New
I feel like
England's tough.
that's the trend in the U.S. in general.
Mm-hmm.
That like I feel like only like the filthy rich people are able to afford property now, and then they end up like buying a lot of them and just rent it out. But I feel like there's a trend. That's kind of like where we're headed now.
Yeah, I had like my step grandfather. He told me he was like, oh, when I was young, I moved out. When I was 18, I moved and got my own place, and I was, I think he was renting or something. But I know that it's really hard to do that in today's America. Like especially where I live. I mean, like if I lived, honestly, in many other parts of the country, that could still work because the rent isn't so crazy.
Yeah.
Like in these, the Midwestern states and the South. But I know that where I live, it is highly developed, and like moving out is very hard now.
Yeah.
Like my brother still lives at home. I have cousins that are struggling to buy homes, and these are very bright people. Some of them went to schools that are a little more, prestigious, I guess, in the U.S. I still feel like the degree I'm getting here is of higher value just because my classmates were from all over the world,
Yeah.
and you can't really buy that in an American school. Like it's not so diverse sometimes. I mean, my old university, we had exchange students, but
Yeah, it's true. I feel like the opportunities that we've gotten here were like when I was studying in the U.S. Like there were a lot of opportunities at Rutgers,
yeah, of course.
But it was like there were many more than at UNIP, but it was also much harder to kind of like get them.
Yeah.
So like if you wanted to be in the student council at a school where there are 30,000 students.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, like you had to really really work your ass off.
Yeah, like I remember at my old school at Bridgewater, I ran for parliamentarian in student government. Now, keep in mind I was a freshman, I beat someone else, but the guy who was running, he was a little older than me. He was like maybe like in his third or fourth year.
Yep.
Yeah, he kind of blew me out of the water. But like, what do you expect? I mean, like I got actually a fair number of votes, but I think he had more than double of what mine were.
Yeah.
And people knew his name. I mean, everyone on campus knew this guy. And then I ended up quitting about a month later. They gave me another job, but I remember I quit because I was just not ready for it. You know,
Yeah.
I was 18.
Yeah,
I didn't really
exactly.
drink much. I didn't really,
Yeah.
you know, try out all these things. So I remember being very like, yeah, this is not my priority right now. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like, I don't know. Like, I need to figure out how to be a human being first. Because like,
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
not there yet.
And yeah, I feel like we're still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I feel like
of course.
everybody is. So.
But I don't know, like, honestly, to recap what we were talking about, you have to find things that you're passionate about that you can
Yep.
pursue. And it's like, okay, let's say you like painting like a lot. Make sure you do that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like you just have to find these things that speak to you, like,
And also a big piece of advice I would give is don't be afraid to make mistakes.
yeah.
Like everyone makes mistakes, but you know, don't be afraid to look like an idiot to kind of make the mistake unless like you know, unless it will get you in prison, let's say, but
Yeah.
but don't be afraid to make mistakes, you know, everyone does. And you know, if you fall down because of that mistake, you know, you can learn from it and then kind of use that to achieve better results in the long term.
Sometimes it's hard to learn from something that happens as well.
Yeah.
Like, I've made the same mistake a few times
Yeah.
now, you know? So it's,
What I've started doing is that like a lot of people kind of like make a mistake and don't reflect on it. But what I've started doing after that episode in America, after my health issues, like not the small mistakes, but like the big mistakes that I make, I like write them down and write down like a structure on what I would do if that happens next time. So like for me, like how I memorize things, I write them down, you know. Nothing to me helps me better than writing everything down. So if I do something that's like really messed up or that like I kind of end up regretting or that kind of didn't achieve the result that I wanted to achieve, I write it down and kind of like really take an hour, take 2 hours if it's like a big problem, you know, to brainstorm how I would solve that problem like in a perfect scenario, you know, under no pressure, under no stress. And then when you kind of encounter the same problem in the future, you will know, like you will have a blueprint on how to deal with it.
yeah.
So I feel like that helps me a lot, and like recently, like that's been kind of a key part of my life.
I do something similar. I talk myself through it, or like I'll like talk to either somebody or sometimes not at all. I'll just kind of like talk myself through it. You know, writing is also good though. I've done that a little bit as well.
Yeah. What I do with it's good that you like talk to others because I have a big kind of problem with that. Like still, you know, I've always respected people who can talk about their problems because you know everyone that knows me, like all my friends, like my family, whenever I have a problem I kind of try to deal with that myself.
Yeah.
And I real like I have a hate, like I hate when other people have to help me, you know, like I hate
Yeah.
that feeling of like
Yeah.
other people being kind of like responsible for my problems. And when I'm kind of struggling with something, like don't do this, guys. When I'm struggling with something, I like do it myself. Like if it's something like personal, I do it myself no matter what. If it's not like, you know, solving like learning coding or whatever, then I ask like teachers. But if it's like personal issues, emotional issues, whatever, I like really internalize it. And then what I've kind of started doing is like really like taking it out on myself, like in the gym, you know. I kind of use it as fuel for the gym, but maybe like
No, I think it works that way.
yeah, it works that way, but you know, it's also like worth like considering, you know, when I have problems or when other people have problems, like a lot of the times it's kind of better to, you know, get a second pair of eyes on it and
Yeah, I would
see other
agree.
people's perspective, because a lot of the things that like when you kind of see a problem, a lot of other people might not see it as a problem, and that can or might kind of see as a very like simple solution that doesn't come to you in the heat of the moment, or like you kind of get stuck in the repetitive thoughts.
Sometimes you see red too.
Yeah.
You're seeing through these goggles,
Yeah.
and in that moment, like I had a family member say you should never drive angry.
Yeah,
Like, you could make a mistake. Usually when I'm that mad, I'll like pull over and just
Mm.
kind of like chill out for a
Yeah.
minute. But I think it's good being able to talk about your problems. Even I know I'm embarrassed about some things, and I feel like you can't really say it. But recently I've been trying to speak with others and kind of get their opinions on
Yeah.
some things that are troubling me.
And it helps. It like genuinely helps. But
Yeah.
the hardest part is like actually getting yourself to kind of start talking about it instead of just like internalizing it.
A good way I've thought about it, right? Like from seeing it in movies and stuff, right? Even in these fantasy movies, sometimes in like more like real life things, it's like seeking counsel. It's
Yeah.
like talking to someone who's a little wiser than you.
Exactly.
I like talking to old people sometimes because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, when I was when I was 25, I did this. I remember at the liquor store, there were people coming in there where they were like, I got control of my alcoholism, for example. I mean, how much control do they have, right?
Yeah, like
Coming in.
yeah, like with the alcoholism, I don't feel like the word control kind of should be in the same sentence.
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah, and I've had that same thing, and recently, like before I stopped drinking 2 months ago, I kind of like it was getting like my kind of alcohol issue. Like after I came back from America, and started studying at UNIP, I started drinking again, and like it started off as like just like beer,
yeah,
just like very like light. I wasn't even supposed to drink because I was still on medication, and I started drinking beer, and I was just like, it can't hurt. Like it's just like one beer. But then I kind of like started getting back to my old habits of like drinking a lot. Like kind of taking it. Like I didn't really like dabble in drugs, but like I took it very like over the top with alcohol, and I started drinking like it until like 2 months ago. I was drinking like 3-4 times a week, like very heavily,
yeah,
like hard liquor. You know how I used to drink.
yeah.
And
It's the
like
college life.
hard liquor, a lot of it, and I felt like by then I was like already off the medication, but I felt like I'm kind of getting back to what kind of ended my life in the U.S.
Yeah,
I kind of had that like flashback of like where I was kind of going overboard with drugs in the U.S. and I realized that if I don't stop it and if I don't kind of like talk about it with someone, I will crash. But
yeah,
I didn't talk about it with someone, and I stopped drinking like completely. I cut it out completely,
yeah,
and after like a month of not drinking, I came to visit my parents in my hometown, and I remember like my dad like asking me like, "What's wrong? Like you seem like off and blah 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 blah," and like I kind of like I was like for the month after I stopped drinking, I was like going down like a downward spiral because I was kind of like I didn't have anything to do.
yeah. You were missing it a little
Yeah,
bit.
I wasn't like missing the drinking, but I kind of didn't find anything else to do instead of it.
Yeah,
Like up
yeah,
until then, every single night, like it was a routine. I went out, I drank. I went out, I drank. I partied, I drank.
yeah,
And like if you kind of cut out drinking, you have like the key way to kind of keep your sanity
yeah,
is to replace it with something like healthy. But I didn't replace it with anything, and I kind of like thought that I would just like chill at home and watch TV. But I like had that urge, like to go out to party, to like have some drinks with friends. It wasn't really like because of the alcohol, but it was because of like the environment.
yeah, yeah,
It wasn't that I was like, I hate the taste of alcohol. Like I've hated it for my whole life, but it kind of like belongs to this like because it's like so deeply rooted in our culture.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's why I was like kind of I wanted to go to these parties, have a free drinks. But then after I came to my parents, I kind of like I talked to my dad, and I started like he asked me what's wrong, and I couldn't like tell him. I didn't want to tell him, and I eventually like started crying, and I told him that like, Dad, I stopped drinking a month ago, and I'm feeling like absolute shit, like absolute garbage. And he kind of like looked at me and just like, well, like what have you been doing like instead of drinking? And I like look at him and I'm like, well, like nothing. Like what should I do?
Yeah,
I was just like, I don't know, just like watch TV, like do like go for a jog, like read books, anything.
yeah,
And I kind of like didn't really have a plan. Like we pinpointed the issue, like that I didn't have a plan on like what to do instead of this.
Sometimes the planning part is the hardest because you look at a plan and you're like, okay, like that's easy. I don't even need to write it. But then you think about it again, and then it's ever more complex.
Yeah.
You know, so for example, it's like, okay, let me read a book. Which book? When?
Yeah.
Are you going to be interested in it?
Yeah.
Do you really think you have the attention span for
It's-
that?
it's-
Not me saying it to you.
Yeah,
but
no,
like,
no, it's really,
know
it's
I'm
really
not-
like that. It's
Yeah.
really like that. Like honestly, like right now when I kind of decide that I want to do something, I put it in my calendar in the most detail possible.
Yeah, you're
If
good
I-
with that. I've noticed
Yeah,
that.
like
Yeah.
like if you look at my calendar, it's just like blocks upon blocks, and once you like kind of like initially you will like you might be the type of person to just like not look at your calendar or anything. But what I've done is I've kind of like put it on my home screen, like in the middle of my iPhone home screen. This is my calendar, and it's just like sitting there. So every time I open my phone, I'll look at it. Number one, and number two, you also kind of have to like convince yourself that it's good for you.
Yeah.
And like just make sure the first few days of kind of like putting everything down in your calendar, make sure you kick yourself to like do everything that's written in there.
Yeah.
Like no matter what, like who calls you, like let's go for a beer, let's do this, let's do that. Just like if it's in your calendar, you have to do it.
Yeah,
And if
that's,
you kind
that's a good way.
If you kind of get into that mindset of like convincing yourself that you have to do whatever's your calendar tells you, it kind of makes it much simpler to like follow it, and it makes it harder to avoid it. And like even when you want to kind of not do it, just like do it, just push yourself. It's like you decided on it, it's good for you, just like do it and you'll be thankful for it. So that's kind of like a way to kind of keep yourself from falling down again into like the same old habits, into like the thing, and to kind of do the things that you want to do instead of the things that are kind of like short-term pleasure and that just like lead nowhere. But yeah, how have you been like kind of making sure you focus on your long-term goals instead of like the short-term ones?
I do something similar. I write big things of the day in my calendar. I don't put so much in there, even though I want to. Like that's something I need to work on myself. But another wise person told me that if you have something that needs to be done and it takes less than 5 minutes to do, then do it at that moment, like when you think of it. But I know we're getting like close to the end. We're actually a little over.
Oh,
but
okay.
No, but it's okay. I wanted to say, like, if you have anything you want to leave the audience with, like very short, you can go ahead and.
I'll just say that people go through a lot of things in their life. We all go through hardships. It's part of being a human. But if you're kind of in this hole of self-doubt and anxiety or like whatever, if you doubt yourself, like I know it's very hard to kind of like do the things that you have to do, that you have to do, but it's about like if you can't do it right away, just like do a small part of it. If you kind of want to start working out, okay, maybe don't go to the gym like 6 times a week like right away. Maybe try like running in the morning or like for 15 minutes, or just do like a small part of that thing and kind of like make a plan to build it up and follow that plan, and like make sure you keep the bigger picture in mind, like where you kind of want to go, in life, what you want to achieve. Just always, when you're kind of doubting yourself, when you have anxiety, when you're kind of mad that you failed at something, just look at the bigger picture and think, how do I get there? And what I'm doing right now, is it getting me there? So I feel like I'll just leave you with that.
That's good. I like that. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, JP.
Anytime. Guys, check out episode 39 when it comes, and peace.
See ya.
Cheers.